I'm curious, how did you realize that type 6 was your type when you started learning about the Enneagram?
I think I can't remember which came first, but it was sort of a two-part process. The first part was I was working, one of the nonprofit organizations I was working with signed our team up to complete an online assessment through an agency, a third-party agency. And then we received the results of that assessment. And then we had like a one in-person kind of review, but the group was so big, we weren't going through our individual reviews. It was just sort of an Enneagram overview from this presenter that then we were ideally able to use that information to interpret our Enneagram results. And I have to say that how Enneagram coaches like you break down the Enneagram into bite-sized digestible pieces that we can actually make sense of and use in our life is incredible. And I wouldn't know how valuable that is if I hadn't sat through a presentation like this, where I really was feeling super overwhelmed and confused by all of the information. And so I think after that training, I left something along the lines of thinking like, I'm a 6 wing 2, like I'm a 6 wing 2 when I'm unhealthy, which we know that that's not how wings work. And now I identify with that 7 wing. And what really brought my understanding or kind of identity as that Enneagram 6 from just knowing it from an assessment to feeling it, feeling seen, feeling validated was, I don't know if you remember the album, I think it's like Sleeping at Last. He composed a song for each number type of the Enneagram. And I am one of those people that when I heard my song and I had that moment of feeling understood in a new way, I cried.
I think a lot of people, that's always the feedback. Anytime somebody
Right?
mentions Sleeping Out Last, they're like, and then I cried.
Yes. And they're very, very like abstract songs. So that is what he created with that is amazing for it to create that response in each of the number types.
I mean, I'll have to link that. And I actually haven't listened to my own. I just keep hearing people and I'm like, I don't know, like a song. I doubt that
Right.
I get it. But okay, now that you said it, I'm like, okay, I'll check it out. You know, what's so interesting is what made you think that, what was it about the 2 that felt like, oh, maybe this is like my second one? Because this is very common for women. I feel like to have a 2 somewhere in the top of their list initially.
For me, what it was the characteristics or the qualities that we often see associated in a 2 were the types of behaviors that I was using in situations where I felt unsafe. And my coping mechanism to recreate that safety was to try and make sure everybody else was okay. So putting other people's needs before my own, giving, caretaking, those types of things were just an attempt that I now know they were just an attempt to find my way back to safety. This ability to trust myself. And so now what it looks like when I am practicing trusting myself, and it's worth saying, I didn't realize that I didn't know how to trust myself until I realized it. So there was a lot of time spent where I didn't realize that this was even an issue. And so now trusting myself is kind of making decisions with the understanding that there is not a right and wrong. That if I make a decision and it doesn't play out the way I want, it wasn't a bad decision and the outcome is not a failure. And so kind of being more willing to move through that decision-making process, knowing that whatever is to come, I'm going to collect experience. I'm going to get insight, information. I'm also going to know like how it felt. And all of that is going to continue helping me make future decisions. And from there, it's easier to look to other people because I've likely identified the problem or the need or the desire, or even just the want. Like, I want to do this in my business because I think it would be fun, or I think it would be helpful. Like, I get to decide that first. And then I feel a little bit more in control when I go looking to an external support system, whether that's a coach, a mentor, a course, or a program. And it's like when you go for a job interview, and traditionally we think that the company is interviewing the individual, but it's becoming a more acceptable or a more reasonable idea that it's sort of a two-way street interview. Things need to be a good fit both ways. And so there's a rebalancing of that power and that authority. And so that's sort of what I'm channeling when I'm going and looking for people. And then I'm reminding myself that no matter who I pick or what I pick, I still am responsible for my own business, and I cannot expect them to be responsible for my outcomes.
Oh my God. So many good things, Katie. My Enneagram mugs for the type 6, I wrote, prepared for the worst, but planning for the best. Because I also think it could have been like contingency planning is my love language. Does that resonate with you? And like, how do you, like, what does that mean to you?
I think for me, it means I would prefer to map things out. I want to know where I'm going. And at the same time, I can't keep an agenda or a calendar up to date to save my life. I am not a digital calendar person. To-do lists make me feel trapped. Maybe that's my 7 energy. And at the same time, I think how it shows for me is not so much in that rigidity as it is, I need a map. And that's just like the best language I can put to it, because a lot of times it lives in my head, but I need to know where I'm going, and I need to have some idea. And a lot of it just comes instinctually and is some of what I think allows me to do the work that I do with my clients. I just sort of see the map. That's like my lens. Like, it's like I've got the goggles on, the superhero goggles, the night vision. But when I put mine on, it's like I see the world through like graphs, not graphs, like what are those things? Like the little spider graphs, where like the little bubble graphs, where it's like you start in the middle and you work your way out. And the reason I want that is because so that there's it doesn't make me feel confined. It actually gives me the freedom to follow whichever thing feels best. And then knowing if that thing doesn't go the direction I want, I've still got all these other options. And we're still going to continue going in a meaningful direction. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does.
I don't like set plans. My poor husband, just last weekend, I was asking him something to do around the house, and he's a 9, and I can just run through like 5 game plans of what we're going to do around the house for one afternoon. And I've just realized he cannot keep up. And I can it's like, okay, we're swapping out number 3 for number 5, or we're going to move number 2 down to number 5 because that makes more sense, because we're already more close to doing number 1. And like, that is just my brain all the time. And so I've had to start saying back to him, I tend to overestimate the amount of time we have in the day, or I tend to change plans so naturally that I don't even realize that what we're doing isn't even one of the 5 things I said we were going to do, because this thing just felt so natural to start on. I said, you can tell me, you can say like, whoa, Katie, because in my mind, it's all still within kind of that bubble graph. When I surveyed the yard and came up with what we needed to do that afternoon for the grass or the garden, or, it all made it on that bubble graph. But my poor husband doesn't have a copy of the bubble graph. And he's like, where are we going? And I'm like, to that thing. And nope, to that thing. So that is sort of my version of a contingency plan, rather than, I don't know what other people's contingency plans might look like.
Yeah, I'm so glad you shared that too.